A mother of 3 stopped answering her phone. Her family grew worried. When police were asked to perform a welfare check at her home, it seemed like a routine call, the kind officers handle dozens of times each week. But what began as a simple wellness check would spiral into one of the most perplexing murder investigations in recent memory. What detectives discovered inside that home was just the beginning. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the case of Kristil Krug took turns that even the most experienced investigators could not have predicted. The truth behind her death would challenge everything authorities thought they knew about murder investigations. This is the story of Kristil Krug, and the twist at the end feels like something out of a detective novel, except every word of it is real. Kristil Krug was a 48-year-old mother living in Kennewick, Washington. She had 3 children who meant everything to her. By all accounts, Kristil was a devoted parent who maintained regular contact with her family. She worked hard to provide for her children and kept close relationships with those who mattered most in her life. In early 2021, Kristil's family noticed something unusual. She had stopped responding to phone calls. Text messages went unanswered. For a woman who typically stayed in constant communication with her loved ones, this silence was deeply concerning. Days passed with no word from Kristil. Her family knew something was wrong. On February 10, 2021, worried relatives contacted the Kennewick Police Department. They requested a welfare check at Kristil's residence. Officers were dispatched to her home, expecting to find perhaps a medical emergency or a simple misunderstanding. What they encountered instead would launch an investigation that would baffle them for months. When police arrived at the residence, they found the home appeared undisturbed from the outside. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no evidence of a struggle visible from the exterior. Everything looked normal. But when officers entered the home, they made a grim discovery. Kristil Krug was found deceased inside her residence. The initial assessment suggested she had been dead for several days. Detectives were called to the scene immediately. What had started as a welfare check had now become a homicide investigation. But here is where the case took its first unexpected turn. When forensic investigators examined Kristil's body and the crime scene, they found evidence that deeply troubled them. This was not a straightforward case. The circumstances surrounding her death were puzzling. Detectives had more questions than answers. The manner of death was classified as suspicious, however. The exact cause would require extensive forensic analysis. What detectives could determine immediately was that Kristil had suffered blunt force trauma. But the scene itself told a conflicting story. Some elements suggested a possible accident, other evidence pointed toward foul play. Investigators needed time to piece together what had truly happened. As word spread through the community, neighbors and friends were shocked. Kristil was known as a kind woman who kept to herself but was always friendly when encountered. No one could imagine who would want to harm her. Detectives began the painstaking work of interviewing everyone who knew Kristil, hoping to find a lead that would point them in the right direction. But as investigators would soon discover, the people closest to Kristil were hiding secrets. And those secrets would lead detectives down a path they never expected to travel. Detectives immediately began building a timeline of Kristil's final days. When was she last seen alive? Who had contact with her before she died? What was happening in her life that might have led to her death? These were the questions that needed answers. Through phone records and interviews, investigators learned that Kristil had been in contact with several individuals in the days leading up to her death. Family members, friends, acquaintances. Each person was interviewed and their movements accounted for. Detectives worked methodically, eliminating suspects one by one. One name kept appearing in the investigation: David Krug, Kristil's estranged husband. The couple had been separated for some time, though they were not yet divorced. According to family members, the relationship had become strained in recent years. There had been conflicts, arguments, the kind of discord that sometimes escalates into violence. Detectives focused their attention on David Krug. In homicide cases involving women, statistically, intimate partners are often the perpetrators. David became the primary person of interest. Officers brought him in for questioning. They examined his alibi, They searched for any evidence connecting him to the crime scene. David Krug maintained his innocence. He claimed he had not seen Kristil in the days before her death. He provided an alibi that seemed to check out. Investigators verified his whereabouts during the estimated time of death. Security camera footage, cell phone pings, and witness statements appeared to corroborate his account. David Krug was nowhere near Kristil's home when she died. Detectives were frustrated. Their most obvious suspect had a solid alibi, but they were not ready to eliminate him entirely. Perhaps he had hired someone. Perhaps there was an accomplice. The investigation continued with David remaining under scrutiny. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the crime scene progressed. Detectives collected DNA evidence, fingerprints, and trace materials from Kristil's home. They examined her phone records in detail. They reviewed her financial transactions. They spoke with her employer, her neighbors, her children. They were building a comprehensive picture of Kristil's life, hoping that somewhere in that picture, a killer would emerge. But then, investigators discovered something that changed the entire direction of the case. While examining Kristil's phone records, detectives noticed frequent communication with a man named Adam Walker. The calls and text messages between Kristil and Adam were extensive. They spoke multiple times per day. The content of their messages suggested an intimate relationship. Kristil had been seeing someone. And that someone was not her estranged husband. Adam Walker became the new focus of the investigation. Who was this man? What was the nature of his relationship with Kristil? And where was he on the night she died? Detectives ran a background check on Adam Walker. What they discovered raised immediate red flags. Adam had a criminal history. Past arrests, a record that included violence. This was not a man with a clean past. Investigators knew they needed to speak with him immediately. When detectives attempted to locate Adam Walker, they encountered an unexpected problem. He had disappeared. In the days following Kristil's death, Adam had left town. He was not answering his phone. His family claimed they did not know where he was. Friends said he had mentioned needing to get away for a while. To investigators, this behavior was highly suspicious. A man with a violent past, romantically involved with a murder victim, who vanishes immediately after her death. The case against Adam Walker was building. Detectives issued a "Be on the lookout" alert for his vehicle. They obtained a warrant to search his residence. They began the process of tracking his movements through financial records and cell phone data. But what investigators found when they finally located Adam Walker would shock them. Because the truth about Kristil Krug's death was far more complicated than anyone had imagined. The investigation into Kristil Krug's death had gone cold. Despite their best efforts, detectives could not locate Adam Walker. He had seemingly vanished without a trace. The case remained open, but progress had stalled. Kristil's family grew frustrated, desperate for answers and justice. Then, in late March 2021, detectives received a tip. An anonymous caller reported seeing a man matching Adam Walker's description in a neighboring county. Law enforcement officers responded to the location. They found Adam Walker staying at a motel under a false name. He was taken into custody without incident. During the arrest, officers noted Adam's demeanor. He appeared nervous, agitated. When informed that detectives wanted to question him about Kristil Krug's death, Adam's reaction was telling. He did not express surprise or confusion. He did not ask what had happened to Kristil. Instead, he immediately requested a lawyer. Back at the police station, detectives prepared for what they hoped would be a breakthrough interrogation. They had circumstantial evidence connecting Adam to the crime. They had his suspicious disappearance. They had his criminal history. But they still lacked concrete proof that Adam Walker had killed Kristil Krug. The interrogation began. Adam Walker sat across from two seasoned detectives in a small, windowless room. Despite having requested a lawyer, Adam agreed to answer a few preliminary questions. Detectives started with simple inquiries. How did you know Kristil? When did you last see her? Can you account for your whereabouts on the night of her death? Adam's answers were careful, measured. He admitted to having a relationship with Kristil. He confirmed they had been seeing each other for several months. But when asked about the night of her death, Adam became evasive. He claimed he could not remember exactly where he had been. He suggested his memory was unclear due to stress. Detectives pressed harder. They presented evidence of his phone being in the vicinity of Kristil's home around the estimated time of death. They mentioned the suspicious timing of his disappearance. They pointed out that fleeing after someone dies looks very bad for a suspect. And then Adam Walker did something completely unexpected. He broke down. Tears streamed down his face as he placed his head in his hands. For several minutes, he said nothing. Detectives waited, sensing they were on the verge of a confession. But what Adam Walker said next was not what detectives anticipated. "I loved her," Adam said quietly. "But I did not kill her. I could never hurt Kristil. You need to look at someone else. Someone who had access to her home. Someone she trusted." Detectives leaned forward. "Who are you talking about?" Adam took a deep breath. "Her son. You need to look at her son." The interrogation room fell silent. Detectives exchanged glances. This was the twist they had not seen coming. Adam Walker was not confessing. He was pointing the finger at Kristil's own child. Kristil Krug had 3 children. 2 daughters and 1 son. Throughout the investigation, detectives had spoken with all of them. They had expressed grief over their mother's death. They had cooperated with the investigation. They had provided statements and answered questions. None of them had been considered suspects. But now Adam Walker's accusation forced investigators to take another look, specifically at Kristil's son, whose name authorities have not publicly released due to the sensitive nature of the case. For the purposes of this investigation, we will refer to him as John. John was in his mid-20s. He had been living with Kristil on and off for the past year. According to Adam Walker, the relationship between Kristil and her son had become increasingly strained. There had been arguments, financial disputes. John had struggled with substance abuse issues and had difficulty maintaining employment. Kristil had been trying to help him get back on his feet, but it had created tension in the household. Adam told detectives something crucial. In the weeks before her death, Kristil had confided in him that she was afraid of her son. John's behavior had become erratic. He had asked her for money repeatedly. When she refused, he became angry, aggressive. Kristil had told Adam she was considering asking John to leave the home permanently. Detectives reviewed their earlier interviews with John. At the time, he had seemed appropriately distraught over his mother's death. He claimed he had not been at the home when she died. He said he had been staying with a friend for a few days. But investigators had not pressed him hard on these details. They had not verified his alibi thoroughly. Their focus had been elsewhere. Now, with Adam Walker's accusation in mind, detectives re-examined the evidence. They reviewed the forensic findings from Kristil's home. And that is when they noticed something they had previously overlooked. DNA evidence collected from the crime scene included samples that did not belong to Kristil or Adam Walker. When tested against the DNA database, there was a familial match. The DNA belonged to someone related to Kristil. When compared to samples from her children, the match was confirmed. John's DNA was at the crime scene, but John lived at the home. His DNA being present was not necessarily incriminating. Detectives needed more. They re-interviewed the friend John claimed to have been staying with on the night of Kristil's death. Under renewed questioning, the friend's story began to fall apart. He admitted that John had asked him to lie to police. In truth, John had not been with him that night. Armed with this new information, detectives obtained a search warrant for John's personal belongings. What they discovered was damning. In John's vehicle, hidden beneath the spare tire, investigators found clothing with blood stains. Laboratory analysis confirmed the blood was Kristil's. Detectives also uncovered financial records showing that John had been stealing money from his mother. He had forged checks, used her credit cards without permission. Kristil had recently discovered the theft and confronted him. According to text messages recovered from her phone, Kristil had threatened to report John to the authorities if he did not return the money. The motive was now clear. John had been stealing from his mother. When confronted, he feared legal consequences. On the night of February 9, 2021, an argument had escalated. In a moment of rage and panic, John had struck his mother. The blunt force trauma that killed Kristil Krug had been inflicted by her own son. After killing his mother, John had attempted to stage the scene to look like a possible accident or the work of an intruder. He had then fled the home, discarding evidence and establishing a false alibi. He had counted on police focusing on other suspects: David Krug, the estranged husband; Adam Walker, the boyfriend with a criminal past; anyone but him. But the evidence told the truth, and that evidence led directly to John. In April 2021, Kristil Krug's son was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The case against him was built on DNA evidence, blood-stained clothing, financial records, false alibi statements, and witness testimony from Adam Walker. John initially maintained his innocence. He claimed the evidence had been planted. He suggested that Adam Walker had killed his mother and framed him. But as the case proceeded through the legal system, the mountain of evidence became insurmountable. During pre-trial proceedings, prosecutors presented a timeline that reconstructed the night of Kristil's death. The argument between mother and son, the violent confrontation, the cover-up attempt, the calculated deception that followed, every piece fit together into a tragic narrative of betrayal and violence within a family. Facing the overwhelming evidence, John's legal team advised him to accept a plea agreement. In exchange for pleading guilty to second-degree murder, prosecutors agreed not to pursue a first-degree murder charge. John accepted the deal. In the summer of 2021, John stood before a judge and admitted to killing his mother. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. During the sentencing hearing, Kristil's daughters delivered victim impact statements. They spoke of their mother's kindness, her dedication to her children, the unimaginable pain of losing her to violence at the hands of their own brother. The judge, in delivering the sentence, noted the particularly egregious nature of the crime. A mother who had tried to help her troubled son had been repaid with brutality. The betrayal of that trust, the judge said, warranted a substantial prison term. Today, John remains incarcerated. He will be eligible for parole after serving a minimum of 17 years. Kristil's daughters have stated publicly that they will oppose any early release. Adam Walker, whose testimony proved crucial to solving the case, was never charged with any crime. While his initial disappearance had made him a suspect, investigators ultimately concluded he had fled out of fear and grief, not guilt. His relationship with Kristil had been genuine. His information about her son's behavior had been truthful. The murder of Kristil Krug demonstrates something profound about criminal investigations. The obvious suspect is not always the guilty party. Detectives initially focused on the estranged husband, then on the boyfriend with a criminal history. Both seemed like logical suspects based on statistics and circumstances. But the real killer had been hiding in plain sight: a son, a family member, someone who had every reason to be at the home, someone whose DNA would naturally be present, someone who could move freely without suspicion. John had counted on investigators looking elsewhere. For a time his strategy worked. What ultimately solved this case was persistence. Detectives who refused to stop investigating when obvious leads dried up. A witness who came forward with crucial information. Forensic evidence that told the story when words lied. And investigators who were willing to reconsider their assumptions when new facts emerged. Kristil Krug was a mother who tried to help her son, even when it put her at risk. She confronted theft, she set boundaries, she attempted to guide her child toward a better path, and for those efforts, she lost her life. Her story is a reminder that the most dangerous threats sometimes come from those we least expect. That betrayal can occur within families. That love does not always protect us from violence. And that justice, while it cannot bring back the dead, can at least provide accountability. If you found this investigation compelling, leave your thoughts in the comments below. What surprised you most about this case? And subscribe for more true crime investigations that reveal unexpected twists and showcase the dedicated work of detectives who refuse to give up until justice is served. The case of Kristil Krug is closed. But her memory lives on through her daughters and through the lessons her tragedy teaches about trust, family, and the pursuit of truth.